So allow me to go through the brief. The assessment details are: the module title is Level Design and the module code is DAC 504. I'm the module leader, Adam Barton, and the level for this unit is level 5, which is the second year of the degree. The assessment title is Tinatob, and you can pronounce that however you want to, and the assessment number is AE1. So the assessment type is a presentation and the restriction is 15 minutes. There is no penalty for submitting below the time limit, but students should be aware that there is a risk that they may not maximize their potential mark. So that is to say, if your video is shorter than 15 minutes, you might not get a good mark. And again, the indication would be if your video was like only 2 or 3 minutes long, then that's an indication that something is seriously missing. It is essential that assignments keep within the time limit stated above. Any work beyond the maximum time limit permitted will be disregarded and not accounted for in the final grade. And that is to say, if your video goes beyond 15 minutes, after the 15-minute mark, none of that work will be assessed. The assessment is individual, so even though the unit and the participation is going to be group work, every student gets their own individual mark. The assessment weighting is 100% because there is only one assessment on this unit. The issue date is the 28th of September 2020 and the handing date is the 18th of December 2020. These dates are subject to change as I'm recording this video in advance. The planned feedback date is within 4 weeks and the mode of submission is online, so that is through the sole page. The number of copies you need to submit is just the one, and this assignment is exempt from anonymous marking. The assessment task. The student will present their contribution to the level design projects. In the presentation, the student will provide evidence of production and supporting methodologies. They will state the design intention for the level and critique the execution. The use of modular techniques and texturing methods will be described. Evidence of the stages of development will be evaluated. The student will discuss their peer review process and outcomes. The student will submit a pre-recorded video presentation with a supporting annotated bibliography. Then we have a presentation schedule, so the student is advised to stick to the presentation schedule in its running order, but the times are merely there as a guide. So we have about half a minute for the overview of the level and selected assets, and in that section you should clearly quantify what was achieved. So in other words, state how many textures you made, how many trim sheets, how many assets, how many modular components, what lighting you did, that kind of thing. The next section is the design intent and the design evaluation, and this is where you're going to be looking at the 2 levels that you've made. You're going to be looking at how you communicate to the viewer and how you engage the viewer. You're also going to be looking at the art fatigue mitigation, which is where you try and disguise the modularity and repetition within the level. So I've allocated about 2.5 minutes for the next 3 sections, but this is fairly flexible depending on where your emphasis has been and where your production has been. So, and it breaks down into the modular production techniques, which is how you've actually created the meshes and how they fit together. Textures, trims and material techniques. So the textures will be examples of both bespoke texturing and seamless textures. Trims are textures, or texture sheets rather, that can be used on multiple objects. And material techniques are going to be the advanced use of the blueprint shader in Unreal. So we will be looking at specifically things like world-aligned texturing. After that, the stages of development, the idea here being that you should capture weekly development cycles for the levels so that you can explain during your presentation how the level developed and the specific areas that you worked on. Finally, we have about a 3-minute section for peer review, which is where you discuss the work of others. This is the assessment criteria. Across the top we have the header for the learning outcomes, and then we have a column with the specific skills, and then we have the grading criteria for the A band, B band, C band, D band, and the F band. The F category is the failure, and D band is the minimum pass. The C band is the demonstration of competence, satisfactory level work, which is the average which we expect. The B band is for very good work, and the A band is for exceptionally good work. So we have two sections. We have the production skill area, which is the learning outcomes K1, K2, C1 and P1. And below that we have the professional skills area, which is the learning outcomes T1, T2, P2 and C2. So I'm going to quickly run through each of the specific skills. I'm going to give you the pass and fail criteria, and then the kind of stretch goals for what it is that we're looking for in order to get an A. So we have the modular production. The pass-fail criteria for this is that you need to demonstrate the modular process. I'm looking for 3 or more assets which demonstrate those fundamental skills. If they're not there, then this demonstrates insufficient knowledge, and therefore that would be a fail. What we're looking for in terms of stretch goals is we're looking for well-presented work with high-quality assets, and we're looking for a justification about why these are good assets, so in explaining the use of the technology and the aesthetic value. Texture, trim and tiling. So there are 2 main types of texture that we will be dealing with. Trim textures are those that are shared across multiple meshes, and tiling textures are those that are seamless, where you cannot discern where the edge of the texture is. The pass-fail criteria for this is that you need 4 or more textures which demonstrate both trim and tiling texture work. The stretch goal for this is a range of excellent textures, both in trim and tiling. The metric for what we do in terms of aesthetic we will be covering within the formative assessment. We're looking for a strong justification both aesthetically and technically, and we're looking for material innovation, aesthetic design and viewer engagement. So the pass-fail criteria for this is that your level has to have a visual coherence. That is, the thread throughout the level and the aesthetic value of the components of the level must be at an equivalent stage. You also need to be able to demonstrate that you're able to direct the player with the signaling techniques. The stretch goals for this are strong and well justified visual narrative. So that is an explanation of how you have used narrative control mechanisms, and an embodiment of how you not only direct the player but also how you give the player a sense of the outer world. For the peer review section, we have a pass criteria of you need evidence of at least 2 attempts to peer review work. So you will be given opportunities throughout the unit to look at the work of other students. You will also be required to submit work for peer review. The stretch goal for this is a critical analysis of a range of peer review works. So we're looking for more than 4 pieces of work that have a critical analysis. The critical analysis is about using the correct language to describe their work and referring to wider research in that analysis. Planning and production output. The pass criteria for this is you have to complete at least one level. There must be no significant omissions from that level. In other words, it needs to be visually complete, and no errors. And further in the unit, we will discuss how we grade errors for game art. The stretch goal for this is 2 complete levels with presentation of the modular and texture sets in what we call a separate callout. Evidence for shared assets so that you have engaged with the teams and shared assets and implemented shared assets. And I want to see at least 10 stages of development that are well documented. So as you're going through the unit, you need to document the development of the 2 levels. And finally, research. The pass criteria for this is you need at least 2 or more sources. That's sources that you have found independently with an appropriate valuation. And the research goes in a separate bibliography file. The stretch goal for this is 7 or more sources with a critical analysis of those sources.